Hello and welcome. I'm Carol Cram, host of the Art and Fiction podcast. This episode features Denny S. Bryce and Eliza Knight, co-authors of Can't We Be Friends, a novel of Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe, listed in the music category on Art in Fiction. Denny S. Bryce is an award-winning and best-selling author of historical fiction, including Wild Women in the Blues, listed in the dance category on Art in Fiction. She is also an adjunct professor in the MFA program at Drexel University and a book critic for NPR. Currently, she resides in Savannah, Georgia. Eliza Knight is an award-winning and USA Today and international best-selling author of historical women's fiction. She's written dozens of novels, including The Mayfair Bookshop, listed in the literature category on Art and Fiction, and starring Adele Astaire, listed in the dance category on Art and Fiction. Eliza is also the creator of the popular historical blog History Undressed and host of the History, Books, and Wine podcast. Eliza lives in Maryland and Florida with her husband, 3 daughters, 2 dogs, and a turtle. Welcome to the Art and Fiction podcast, Denny and Eliza.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Hello, so glad to be here.
I so enjoyed reading Can't We Be Friends about two of the 20th century's most iconic entertainers, Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. Let's start out by talking about the genesis of this book. So, Denny, let's start with you. How did you and Eliza come to write this novel?
Well, we actually used to live in the same city, and what we did once a month was get together and have write-ins at each other's respective homes. And in 2019, we were hanging out at Liza's new spot, a beautiful house out in Maryland, someplace. It was huge. There were boxes, I remember that. And we
Nice.
were having a sip of wine, taking a break, Googling whatever, and ran across a photo of Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe looking like just hanging out, just chilling and laughing. Their expressions so organic and normal, as if two friends right there. And I said, well, cool. We got to look into this and see what the deal is. And that's how it started.
So, Eliza, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it was really quite fun. I mean, we were both working on our other projects, but kind of kept stopping to be like, wait a second, I need to dig a little more. And we ended up finding this really cool like little ad or something in Jet magazine for a album called the Friends album that was going to be produced by RCA Records and sung by Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. And we thought, oh my goodness, this album never happened, but clearly they were friends and they were going to be, singing together. So it really was just a catalyst for all of the things we had already found. And we just kept finding all these other little nuggets that were really exciting. And it was kind of history from there.
Yeah, it's such a great idea to take these
Yeah.
two incredible entertainers. They were both so amazing, such amazing entertainers. So you mentioned in your author's notes that both of them changed the face of entertainment. So let's start with Marilyn Monroe. Eliza, there was a lot more to Marilyn Monroe than some of the sort of dumb blonde roles that she played. So how did she move things forward in Hollywood?
Sure. So that was one of the things we really wanted to portray in the novel is that Marilyn was so much deeper than she is thought of as today. And a lot of biographers have kind of put her out there as sort of like the blonde bombshell. There's a lot of people that wanted their 5 seconds of fame that wanted to talk about, their exploits with Marilyn, but not a lot that talks about what a deep study she took as far as like her acting was concerned and her singing as well. And so that was like really important for us to make sure that she came across as a human, but also as a very intelligent and determined human. She was very much interested in her own career and furthering the careers of women. And that's why she decided she was going to take control and form her own production company. If the filmmakers weren't going to pay her a lot and they weren't going to let her do the films she wanted, then she wanted to be in control. Yeah, so she decided she was going to form her own production company, and she sought the assistance of a friend named Milton Green, who was a famous photographer at the time, to help her form this company. She wanted to take back her control of her career. She wanted to be able to have a choice in the films that she made. She wanted to have the ability to make more money with the films that she was working in. And so she formed this production company, which unfortunately in the end didn't end up being able to produce more than two films. But I think she sort of paved the way for actresses and women in the film industry like Reese Witherspoon, who now have their own production companies. And it's not something that was widely done in the 50s and 60s. And so the fact that you have Marilyn sort of like starting that out is just a really great motivator for women that came after.
Yeah, that's
Mhm,
something I
mhm.
knew absolutely nothing about. So that's really wonderful that you could get that into the novel and get that out to the world. Wasn't she pretty much the first, or certainly the first in the 50s?
Yes, there was one person who started before her, but I don't think there's not much talk about it. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the actress, but Marilyn is really known as like the first one who really took off.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, that's amazing. I totally didn't know that. And so Ella Fitzgerald, Denny, can you sum up Ella's contribution to jazz?
Oh, wow. Well, she was just one of the leaders. Chick Webb in 1934 was her first manager, and the whole jazz scene in the 30s, coming out of the explosion of jazz in the 1920s during the Prohibition. So you go from that area to the 1930s, and jazz has changed. It's not necessarily solely what you discovered and found out with Louis Armstrong and the whole New Orleans jazz movement that came up through Chicago. In 1934 was when Ella Fitzgerald walked onto the Apollo Theater stage in New York with the goal of being a dancer. But before she went on stage, she loved dance. That was her thing. She and her cousin or sister practiced constantly to be dancers. And so the thing that happened was that another dance pair performed before she got on stage. And she was like, oh no, I'm not dancing in front of this crowd, not after these people. And so she said, I guess I'll go sing. And like, her voice blew everyone away. Chick Webb was there. Chick Webb was a band leader extraordinaire at the time, very much at the heart and at he was just into the jazz scene with his band. She traveled with him. Her first hit was part of her years with him, a tisket, a tasket.
Yes.
A, what's the next line, Eliza? A da 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 basket. I
Oh my
don't know.
gosh,
But
Bryce, my
we
brain
were
just
singing it a lot when we were writing.
I know,
So now
because
we
now
can
all I can
remember
think
this
of is
stuff.
the lyrics that I rewrote, where she's like, I hope my letter finds your basket.
Oh, we rewrote or wrote Eliza. No, I didn't write any songs, but Eliza wrote a couple of lyrics for songs in the novel, and we had an editor uh, come back to us during copy edit, say you need to get rights for that, and we're like, time out,
We wrote him.
Eliza wrote this, you know, this
That's
is
You have
not
my
fantastic.
permission.
this is where the fiction part comes in.
Yeah.
This is not an original by anybody. So that was hysterical. That was, we haven't told that that
I
before.
know, we
We'll have
should.
to keep that in our roster because
Yeah,
that
Yes.
was that was a fun moment,
it was. I
hearing,
was like, wait, what?
copy, and it's like,
What?
what?
We
Okay.
don't need permission.
But Ella's contribution, I segue into so many different directions there. She was just at the heart of the jazz scene during that time, because by the time we get to where our story begins, which is the 1950s, frankly, there's a epilogue that takes place in the 70s that shoots you into the early 1950s. By that time, Ella had been in the biz almost 20 years. And so her career had been explosive. She did a lot of recordings, but she was playing, the usual spots, the nightclubs, thick cigarette smoke, the New
Mm.
York clubs, the Chicago clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And by the 1950s, the whole music scene had changed. You had more swing. You
Yeah.
had more this, that, and the other.
Yeah,
And
bebop.
one thing that Ella and bebop, but Ella Fitzgerald, I'm gonna throw out a name because Beyonce does a little bit of this her darn self. Ella Fitzgerald made sure she was in the mix for each change. She stayed true to her jazz roots, but she was always on top of the latest trend in music because she was a musician, an artist first and foremost. And what she wanted to do, what she had to do was be on stage performing.
We could talk forever about Ella's music. It's just so amazing. But it's getting back to the novel, at its heart, this novel is a novel about friendship between two powerful and very talented women. So, Denny, would you talk about what the friendship meant from Ella's point of view, the friendship with Marilyn Monroe?
Ella was a hard nut to crack on the friendship road, and
Yes.
what it meant to her, I really feel, was that she gained trust, and that was a big thing for her to trust the genuine expression of friendship that Marilyn threw her way. And so she was not going to jump on the Marilyn bandwagon without some time, some testing, some laughter. I really think that a real entree for Ella in her relationship with Marilyn is because Marilyn had a great sense of humor. And Marilyn was in her way when it came, even though I maybe it's the way Eliza just put Marilyn on the page, but I believe that from our research we found this. Marilyn was a person who enjoyed a lot of her life, a lot of the time. She was a
Mhm.
reader, she was an enthusiast when it came to music and jazz. So Ella learned to trust that she was getting that girl as a friend. And she opened up just quite organically to that sort of friendship energy. I'll put it that way.
Yes, because it was Marilyn that pursued Ella for the
Mm-hmm.
friendship at the beginning, wasn't
Yeah.
it? So,
Yeah.
Eliza, can you talk about what the friendship meant from Marilyn's point of view? Like, what is it about Ella that Marilyn needed, really? I think.
I think what she needed from Ella was honesty. And that's not
Yeah.
something that she got from a lot of the people that were in her realm. You know, most of the people, they were using her for whatever they could give her. And whether or not that was, you know, parts on in a movie or something sexual or pills, like it just seemed like a lot of her relationships weren't genuine. And what she was searching for was someone that she could be genuine with, someone she could be herself with, and that would accept that and be honest with her back. Like, you know, I think one of the great things about their friendship and friendship in general is that you know you can trust someone when they don't mind telling you, you've got a problem right now and you need to fix it. You know, they're not like, oh no, you're fine, everything's fine. You know, Ella was very straightforward about that sort of thing. And I think that is what Marilyn needed, a stable friend who would be honest with her and help her through her times, and someone that she felt she could provide something for too. You know, they think they leaned on each other for a lot of issues. They had similar backgrounds growing up as orphans, being in, you know,
Yeah.
destructive relationships, really trying to push themselves above and on top of their careers. So I think that they both had, you know, ambitious personalities and just were able to actually just be themselves. Like this one candid photo that we found of them, it's just my favorite photo ever. And it's like Ella's clearly saying something funny. And, you know, she's like mid conversation, her hands are like this, and she's laughing. And then Marilyn's got her head thrown back laughing. And it's just so genuine to see that they actually just really enjoyed each other's company. And I think that is what is so important, that they could be real to each other and share so much more than they could with other people, I think.
What you really brought out, both of you, in this novel is female friendship, just the power of female friendship, because both of them did too well with the men in their lives, did they?
Yeah,
Poor
that was a
Marilyn,
roller coaster.
particularly. So, Eliza, why do you think Marilyn kept falling for men who basically abused her? What was going on with her, do you think?
I think that part of the thing is that she, grew up kind of being abused by men in her life and wasn't always very secure. And so a lot of times when women aren't very secure in who they are or the stability of their own lives, they search out sort of like the powerful men. And a lot of times, especially in the 1950s, powerful men took advantage of that. And so she got into relationships with men that were willing to take advantage of her, and that is extremely unfortunate. And I think that's just really what it was, is that she sought out powerful people that could make her feel safe and secure, and they ended up being exactly the opposite.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was
Very.
totally heartbreaking. I didn't actually know much about her relationships. Now, with Ella, I also felt it was very heartbreaking with Thor. I mean, and Denny, how did you learn so much about that relationship?
By deciphering news articles, timing, really looking at when things happened, what was said. At one point in time, there's a news article where Ella Fitzgerald admitted being married to Thor, but that article was minimalized, was
Oh,
pointed to as inaccurate by her management team. Then there was one thing that really made the case to me that that relationship was super romantic and had so many challenges was in 1980s interview that I found on YouTube, where the question was, Ella, how did you avoid scandal in your career? There was never any scandal. And she said, well, I almost had a scandal when I fell in love with a white man from, whatever country. I can't remember.
Norway
She
was.
said the country, yes. And that was just not something that could happen back then.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, we're on the right track with this. So a lot of the comparisons, the timing, locations of where he was, and how that story came out later. I don't want to give away too much,
No,
no spoilers. And the one thing that both women really wanted from their lives was everything. They wanted their careers, they wanted their family, they wanted that husband, they wanted the picket fence and the big career and Oscar night and Grammy night.
yes,
And not that unusual from women today in the entertainment industry and or just doing their life thing, where they're like, hey, I'm juggling, I'm doing. But back in the 1950s, post World War II, a woman's role was in the suburbs. A Black woman's role was not even a point of reference in society, really. In the Black community, people were thriving, but people were not. But recognition outside of that was hard to come by. So these women were no different than women today, except the barriers that kept them from achieving all of the things they wanted, and then their backgrounds, their exposure to so much negativity. I mean, that shapes how you approach relationships. And I feel that that's one of the reasons both of them had such a similar track record.
and what I also really enjoyed is that it's really a novel about striving to be the best, about excellence, even more than fame. I mean, they were both extremely famous, but that
Mm,
wasn't really their goal, was it? Like say from Ella's point of view, what was really her goal apart from, yes, she wanted to have love as well, but from a professional standpoint, was to be the
she
best.
wanted, yeah, to be the best. And to be the best to her was to be on stage, to be an instrument, a part of the band in such a intrinsic way. And then, of course, Marilyn's efforts for perfection. They were both
Yes.
perfectionists.
They were both perfectionists. Yeah, Eliza, if you want to talk a little bit about Marilyn and the actor studio. I mean, she wasn't content just to be like one of the most famous, iconic actresses in the world.
Right. She actually wanted to be the best actress in the world, and she thought
Yeah.
the best way to do that was to take classes. She took classes at UCLA, and then when she found out about the actor studio, she said, I've got to get in there. I need to learn about method acting. And it really was a game changer for her. One of the best films that she ever made was Bus Stop. And that was
Yes.
right after having attended the Actors Studio. And in fact, she enjoyed their coaching so much that she employed them to be her coaches on set when she was filming. So I just think like she always wanted to be like that number one star and not just be seen as like the beautiful blonde bombshell, but just an amazing actress.
Yes, really brought that out because we underestimate Marilyn Monroe. And I think the service you've done in this novel is to just show us how much depth there was to her.
Yeah.
And I came across a quote, Denny, on your website. You write that each of my novels feature a cast of courageous, flawed, and sometimes dangerous female protagonists. I can see Ella as courageous and somewhat flawed, but how about dangerous?
For her, the biggest danger was when she switched managers. I mean, her first love on the management train was Chick Webb, but he
Right.
passed away. But then after all those years with Mo, she made a tremendous choice in changing the course of her career because under Norman Gantz was when she did the songbooks, when she got even more involved in the JATP tour schedule. That's when she was practically European. She spent so
Yeah.
much time because they did 2 tours a year for a certain number of years there for almost a decade to Europe. So yeah, to me, for her, within the framework of her lifestyle, that was a dangerous move for her.
Yes, so I hadn't thought of that because I was wondering where was the danger part. But yes, of course. And that was also like Marilyn, how she was innovative for her time. You know, she took risks and took control of her career.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
Yeah.
inspiring.
And I
Such
mean,
an inspiring novel.
Thank you.
they are both extremely inspiring women in the risks that they took because they didn't know whether they were going to fail or not. They didn't know if that was going to be the end of their career, and they were willing to make that jump. And I think that's inspiring to women of their time, but also women today, for us to be able to take those risks and be willing to see what happens on the other side of what, what we have right now and what we want. It's not always just handed to us. You got to work for it. And sometimes that involves risk. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Extremely timely. So I was curious about what are some of the challenges you faced writing a work of fiction that is actually about two real people. Eliza, do you want to start with that question?
sure.
I'm sure you've had it
Um,
before.
I think that the biggest challenge, honestly, is that this book could have been like, I don't know, 8,000 pages long.
Yeah.
It's just when you're talking about a real person, their lives are so rich and there's so much that both of these women did that we really had to like kind of pick and choose what we were going to put into the book. And in
Mm.
fact, a challenge that Denny and I were put to is that when we turned our book in, it was a lot longer. And our editor
Oh,
said, you've got to cut 150 pages from this book. And so I cried. Denny did not cry. She raged a little.
I raged. That's it. I raged.
that's hard. 150 pages. Oh my
it
God.
was really hard. And so we had to then figure out like, okay, what are we doing here? And the thing that we figured out is that we needed to focus a lot more on the times that they were together, their friendship, really focusing on that part of the story, because that's ultimately what the book was about. And so we cut a lot of those pages from the front. Now, I still think, and I think Denny agrees with me, that even though it was painful to cut them, it was a great idea. And also, having written those pages actually helped us to get to know the women a lot better. And so I think in the end, we came out with a richer book because of it. And so while it was painful, no regrets.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with that. The writing of it, of those pages that ended up being pulled out of the final novel. That's how we got to know them intimately, I feel. And so after we took those pages out and then we went back in to revise what was left, it was just layers, layers, layers that we were
Yeah.
able to put in.
Well, and I think as a reader, some of the most compelling scenes were the ones with the two of them when they were
Mm.
actually together, doing things together. We were talking earlier before we started the podcast about doing a reading. So would you both like to read one bit each from Can't We
Okay.
Be Friends?
Yeah. I
Who's
guess
going to
I'll
start?
start.
Danny, you're starting?
Part I'm
Okay,
reading
awesome.
is at the beginning of the book. So here goes. It's the prologue, and I'm not going to read the entire prologue, but I'll give us a page and a half. How's that?
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay, prologue. Ella, Los Angeles, California, 1972. Hit the high note, go for the C, then drop to the lower register and scat. B dot bop dop do dee zing. When I do that, I disappear into the rhythm. I don't think about what comes next. My body, my muscles, and my skin know what to expect. I don't need to do anything special. I only need to be in that moment, in that zone. You know how it feels to be perfect. The same goes for a musical note, a tempo, or a chord, a song that swings forever. Come on, girl, you've got it made in the shade. Melodies and lyrics play through my mind as effortlessly as my next breath. I am lost in the magic of sound and music, but I don't stay in the bubble as long as I'd like. A breeze stirs. The tangy smell of my imperial roses brushes the tip of my nose. I am in the backyard of my Beverly Hills home, sitting at the table on the patio in an iron chair with a red and white cushion beneath my bottom. It's a sizable cushion. I have a sizable bottom, but that's no never mind. I'm enjoying the flowers and the sunshine, but it's hot for April. The patio table's umbrella saves me from sunstroke, but not from the sweat on my forehead. Ella, do you want to do this out here? The sliding glass door opens and Georgiana, my cousin, emerges. She's a colorful dresser in her long red vest, flowery blouse beneath, and navy blue slacks. Neither one of us are spring chickens. We're closing in on our mid-50s, but unlike me, Georgiana doesn't suffer from swollen ankles or such a roller coaster ride on the bathroom scale. She's steady as they come and twice as agile, carrying a serving tray with a large glass pitcher of iced tea, a couple of matching 12-ounce tumblers, and long-handled spoons. She loves the groovy swirl pitcher set she brought at Gimbel's, which she tells me repeatedly each time she pulls it out of the cabinet. But I'm not but I'm more interested in how much sugar and lemon are on the tray and why she sliced the banana cake so thin.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I love the
That was
banana cake
great.
part.
I like the banana cake part too, and it always makes me want to eat banana cake.
Banana
Yes,
cake.
definitely.
All right. So this is from 1952. Our car waits for Marilyn outside, and she's almost ready to leave. She picks up her Max Factor Coral Glow red lipstick, lines her lips the way she's done since she was 13, and then flashes mascara on her long lashes. It didn't take much to transform herself back then, just like now. There is something in the attitude of Norma Jean, when she is Marilyn, that drives grown men to pant like wolves and women to hiss like snakes. There's a smear of crimson on her brilliant white teeth. She blots the excess on a tissue, then makes a kissy face with a loud smack that always causes her to giggle. I'm Marilyn Monroe. The name drips from her ruby-painted lips like sensual melty chocolate or decadent champagne. A name that isn't easily forgotten, at least not now. People thought her career was made in the shade, but every role, no matter how small, was a hard-won fight through the thick rays of sunlight. There'd been a time, years in fact, when she'd been a starving actress, crying alone in a rented room after not one, not two, but many cynics had told her she wasn't photogenic enough, not talented enough, forgettable. They judged her, categorized her, and filed her away, stuck her new self into a box with her old self, as if there were no distinction. She felt lonely those days, a lot like she had when she was in the orphanage or living as a free servant, which is what happened to most children in the foster care system, in the house of those who said they'd care for her. But she was forgotten there too. And then something happened, just the right amount of publicity, and not the kind that most of these girls crave, the bad kind. And now she eats filet mignon whenever she wants, but only if she keeps Norma Jean put away, only if she keeps her true self a secret.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And that's a great segue into what I want to talk about next is I'm totally intrigued about what it was like to collaborate on a novel. I've never done that before, but mind you, you guys are kind of inspiring me. But could you each talk about the writing process? Eliza, do you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think collaborations are awesome for a number of reasons. One is that you get to really have two distinct voices, especially if you have multiple characters. And then you get to stay true to that character and bring them out. Like, I know for me, when I'm writing multiple characters, sometimes they get a little bit smeared and I have to go in and like really structure them a lot better. But so one of the things I love about collaboration is that you get to really bring out the characters' personalities, I think. And it's also fun to have a project with a friend. Like we get to do these interviews together. We've gotten to go do different touring type things together. And then we got to share like the excitements of fun facts that we found, like, oh my gosh, you want to hear about this? And then also you have someone that you can kind of get on the phone with when something's upsetting that you can chat it out. So
Yeah.
not only is like this a book about friendship, we were able to enjoy our friendship together while
Yeah.
writing it, I think, and that helped a lot. But so that's one of the great things about a collaboration. And the writing process can be really fun if you love spreadsheets, not really fun if you hate spreadsheets.
I love spreadsheets.
So it's sort of like a running joke because I'm obsessed with spreadsheets, and Denny's like, "Why are we doing another spreadsheet?" But it's it helps like organize like all of our outlines. So it was something that we really tried hard to really fill out, like all the different timelines of the characters, but also the timeline of what was going on culturally in the United States and over in Europe, their careers, their personal lives, and also where we got to really like hone the themes because we wanted each chapter to share themes. And I'm going to
Yeah.
let Denny take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, just a comment on those spreadsheets. Lord. Okay, that's enough. I, I'm a Scrivener person and I use things like Aeon Timeline. If there's an app that I can put something in, I'm like happy. But the spreadsheets is so labor intensive, but they were good. We used them really effectively because in addition to having a column up here that might have date and location, a column over here that might have who and what and why, we also had a column that said, what are those themes that we want to really put on the page? Writing thematically is a solid show approach to writing. When you aren't just going to say blah 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 blah, but through that scene you're going to, your goal is to hopefully deliver a message to your
Yeah.
reader and have them have a better understanding of the emotional stakes. So that was really, I think, I have not done collaborations before. Eliza has, but that aspect of storytelling I really appreciated because we were in tune with what was going to not just happen on the page, but what the takeaway needed to be. Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to talk about some problematic things for me. This young lady, Eliza Knight, is a speed demon when it comes to writing. She's been in the biz a little bit longer than me, even though she's a child. But
And she's written a lot of books.
she's written a lot of books, and I can hold all of my books in a right here. But I'm a slower, so sometimes I found that intimidating. I was like, slow down, I'm not there yet. Obviously, I'm a private whiner. I just like whatever. She's doing it again. That sort of thing. But that sort of helped me because she was done with almost the whole book and I was halfway through, but I read through all of hers and that really contributed to making sure that our scene changes had a stronger connection. And I think that helped in our second and third drafts after we got rid of those 150 pages to make it less. I think we did half as many drafts as could have happened because of the fact that I was slower.
And one thing I found interesting is that Marilyn's parts were written in the third person and Ella's in the first person. Why did you guys make that choice?
We talked about that quite a bit, in
Yeah.
fact. The goal, if I recall correctly, and Eliza can fix me on this, was that the story was being told by Ella because Ella was the one who kicks it off in 1972. So it
Yes.
could be in first person Marilyn's part because she was not there. I mean, she was not there in 1972, and this is something she's, you play with time in your mind. They always say when you have a POV character, who are they talking to?
Right.
And that really helps or contributes to how you shape your voice in many ways. And so we made a decision that Ella's talking to the reader and Marilyn's talking to Ella, and that's why it's in third person.
Ella sharing her story and sharing the story of her friendship that she had with Marilyn, that, it was kept quiet during the time that she was friends. And, also when this interviewer was like, tell us about Marilyn, she's like, do I want to? That's a private part of myself.
Yeah.
And so it's really her sharing those bits and us seeing Marilyn through Ella's eyes, I think.
Right. Because one thing that Ella did that gave us a clue that she was exactly the personality that Liza just described is that her commentary to the magazine in 1972 was not accurate. She just perpetuated what was sort of the word on the street, not the truth of the matter. The Macombo Club, Marilyn didn't help her get into the Macombo Club because there was a race issue or something like that. No. The first club that Marilyn did support her getting on the Sunset Strip through the Tiffany Club, but that was because of relationships that Marilyn had and of her star power, of course.
Yes.
But the reason these clubs weren't hiring Ella had nothing to do with race, had to do with her dress size.
Yeah.
They'd already had the likes of, Lena Horne, Eartha Kitt, and Dorothy Dandridge on their stages at Macombo Club, at any of the Sunset Strip. This is pre-Vegas. Sunset Strip was the place to be in the nightclub scene in the 50s. But she's perpetuating the word on the street because she didn't like interviews anyway.
Yes, yeah, you brought that out as well. So you talked about themes earlier. So what would you say is the theme of Can't We Be Friends?
I think friendship, yeah.
And especially the quote that we put in the opening of the book from Michele Obama. I think it just takes it right to the heart. Friendships between women, as any woman will tell you, are built of 1,000 small kindnesses, swapped back and forth and over again.
Yes, I love that quote.
And
that's
when
true.
we ran into that, that was like Michele Obama. And when we saw that, we were like, oh, well, that's it.
Well, there you go.
It was just the perfect, like, that is what we're talking about here.
Yes, and I think that's why it's such an interesting novel because we can all relate to that. We may not be Marilyn Monroe or Ella Fitzgerald, but we understand what it is to have a friend and what a friend means.
Yeah.
So one of my goals with the Art and Fiction podcast is to inspire other authors. Both of you have written several novels before Can't We Be Friends, but can you share with something that you both learned from writing this novel that you didn't know before?
That's a really good question. You've kind of got me like, what? I think I learned a lot about, honestly, the editing process. Denny has a very streamlined editing process that is different than mine. And so learning how to use her editing process, I think, made the chapters tighter and stronger and really brought out the women and the characters and the setting a lot more than any other way that I normally would edit. So I definitely learned a lot from her in that respect.
Ah, that's wonderful. Denny, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you. That was fun. I was going to say something silly, but I was going to say
That's
something
okay.
like the power of spreadsheets. But
Hey, you did learn the power. That's true.
spreadsheets. The thing about the storytelling was something that I'm applying as I go on and on with my next books. It is how to take research and planning and do a better job of turning it into story.
Yeah.
There's a big gap between, I mean, we spent 2 years because we had other projects going, just not constantly doing research, but exchanging things we found and blah, 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 lightweight. But we were immersed in the research. We took our time finding finding facts. But then facts aren't story. And that difference, I really learned about that during doing this with Eliza. And I think I know my latter books are going to be the better for it, for that
That's a really
experience.
good point. Yes. Taking the facts and make it, because we are storytellers. Yeah.
And
We do the
rightly
research, but we are
energy.
ultimately storytellers. So
Yeah.
good segue. What are you each working on now? So Denny, what are you working on? If you want to share, you
Um,
don't have to.
well, I have a book coming out in a few weeks called The Trial of Mrs. Rhinelander, also based on a series of actual events that happened in 1925 New York, having to do with the heir to a real estate fortune who marries a domestic and then a couple of weeks later sues her for an annulment based on fraud because she didn't mention that she was a Negro. So there's that. But that book is done and it's just coming out. But right now I'm working on a story called Where the False Gods Dwell. And it's my first historical psychological thriller. And
Ooh.
it's a ton of fun. I have three POVs. So when we were talking about distinctive voices within the three POVs that I have in this tale, definitely that's something I'm paying attention to. But I'm love 1935. There are some real events scattered through it with a gal named Catherine Dunham, who was a choreographer and dancer in the 1930s, eventually working with Martha Graham and a lot of different people
Oh,
in
fantastic.
her life. But that's not the story. She was also an anthropologist. So my story takes place in Chicago on a ship traveling to Jamaica and then in the Maroon Village in the cockpit country of Jamaica. So, yay!
Fascinating.
I love it.
Well, the dance angle also means it could be on Art and Fiction, the website.
Oh,
But
oh yeah, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
it's definitely.
well, I mean, I'm pretty loose, right? But novels that have to do with some aspect of the arts,
Yeah, well,
all of that.
Catherine Dunham was an amazing dancer and changed a lot of what was happening in modern dance during
Oh,
her long career. I actually met her in
Oh, cool.
2010. Well, I was a professional dancer for a while, and she was probably in her 90s. Or was it 2000? I can't remember because she would have been 100. But she was amazing. But I was a huge fan of the Martha Graham
yeah,
technique.
of
If
course.
you know dance, that's an old school. Could still do the arms, not the
Oh.
legs, but the arms.
So, Eliza, what are you working on?
I have a book coming out this summer as well, so I'm working on the promo for that. It's called The Queen's Faithful Companion. So it's a novel of Queen Elizabeth II, and it's her corgi Susan, who was a birthday gift on her 18th birthday given to her by her father. And Susan is the matriarch of all the Windsor corgis, about 14 generations of them. So it's a novel of their companionship and friendship and the keeper of the Queen's corgis as well. So I had a lot of fun writing that. I got to write in the dog's point of view, which was really fun. Um, and then what I'm also working on right now is not a historical fiction. It's a women's contemporary fiction, and I'm writing it under another name, which I haven't announced yet, but I'll say it here. It's Michele Brandon, and it's about four sorority sisters who are being brought back to their sorority after having graduated to kind of deal with some of the secrets that they buried back when they were in college.
Ooh, interesting. Oh, you guys are busy,
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
which is great. You get
It's
to do it,
wonderful.
which is what success is, isn't it? It's actually getting to write these novels and live in these worlds. Thank you so much, Denny and Eliza, for chatting with me today. This has just been great. As I said, I really enjoyed your novel. I learned a lot, and also I just loved how you collaborated and how you managed to, two people bringing together these two stories. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thank you.
It was fun to chat about it. We're excited that you enjoyed the book too.
I've been speaking with Eliza Knight and Denny S. Bryce, co-authors of Can't We Be Friends, a novel of Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe, listed in the music category on Art and Fiction at www.artandfiction.com. Be sure to check the show notes for a link to the websites for Denny S. Bryce at www.dennysbryce.com and Eliza Knight at www.elizaknight.com. You'll also find a link to a 20% discount on a subscription to Pro Writing Aid, a fantastic editing tool for writers. If you're enjoying the Art and Fiction podcast, please help us keep the lights on by donating a coffee on the Ko-fi website. The link is in the show notes. Also, please follow Art and Fiction on Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to Art and Fiction on YouTube and give the Art and Fiction podcast a positive review or rating wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.